There is a strange power possessed by those who know how to disappear. They do not constantly announce themselves. They do not flood the world with messages, explanations, photographs, or desperate attempts to remain relevant, and yet somehow they occupy the minds of others. You may have experienced this yourself. You meet someone briefly, you exchange a few words. Nothing extraordinary appears to happen. Then, hours later, you find yourself thinking about them. Why? Why does one person vanish from your mind the moment they leave the room while another remains there for days? The answer is not always beauty. It is not always charm. It is not even intelligence. Often the person who remains in your thoughts has simply understood something most people never learn. The mind does not obsess over what is complete. It returns to what is unfinished. People remember the unanswered question, the unexpected silence, the unusual reaction, the conversation that ended before they understood where it was going. The human mind hates empty spaces. When it encounters a mystery, it begins to work. And if you understand this, you can become unforgettable, not by chasing attention, but by creating an experience that the mind cannot easily close. Most people make the same mistake. They reveal everything. They explain their intentions. They answer every question. They respond instantly. They make their feelings obvious. They tell people exactly who they are, what they want, where they are going, and what they think. They believe transparency creates connection. Sometimes it does, but total transparency often destroys curiosity. Think of a book that reveals its ending on the first page. You may still read it, but the tension is gone. Now think of a person who gives you just enough to make you curious, but never enough to make you feel that you have completely understood them. That person occupies your mind differently. You begin asking questions. What did they really mean? Why did they react that way? Why did they leave so calmly? Why didn't they try harder to impress me? Why do I feel as though there is more to them than what I saw? In the moment someone begins asking questions about you, you have entered their mental world. The human mind is naturally drawn toward what it cannot fully understand. When something is completely revealed, completely explained, and completely predictable, curiosity begins to disappear. But when a person leaves behind unanswered questions, small contradictions, unexpected details, or unexplored depths, the mind continues working long after the interaction has ended. This is the psychology of mystery. It is not about pretending to be someone you are not. It is about understanding that you do not need to give everyone access to every part of your personality, your plans, your emotions, or your future. Most people reveal themselves too quickly. They explain where they are going, what they want, how they feel, what they are thinking, and what they intend to do next. They believe that complete openness creates closeness. Sometimes it does, but when you reveal everything immediately, you leave nothing for the imagination to discover. People can understand you, categorize you, and move on. The moment you become completely predictable, you become mentally easy to close. Mystery creates an open loop in the mind. When someone knows only part of the story, their imagination begins creating the rest. They begin asking questions. What is this person really like? What are they working on? Why did they react that way? Why did they remain silent when everyone else was trying to prove themselves? Why did they leave without explaining everything? These questions create mental movement, and whenever someone repeatedly thinks about a question connected to you, your presence becomes stronger in their mind. This is why you should resist the urge to explain yourself constantly. Not every silence needs to be filled. Not every decision needs a detailed explanation. Not every emotion needs to be displayed the moment you feel it. There is a difference between being dishonest and being private. Dishonesty is the creation of a false reality. Privacy is the decision to keep certain parts of your reality for yourself. A person with mystery does not walk into every room trying to prove their intelligence, success, or importance. They allow people to discover these qualities gradually. They may mention a goal without describing every detail of the plan. They may possess knowledge without constantly displaying it. They may have experienced something significant without turning it into a performance. This creates a subtle tension between what people see and what they sense exists beneath the surface. Think of the difference between a person who constantly talks about their ambitions and a person who quietly works towards something that others only discover later. The first person demands attention. The second creates curiosity. When results appear before explanations, people begin looking backward, trying to understand what they missed. They realize that while they were watching the surface, something deeper was happening underneath. The same principle applies to emotional reactions. If people always know exactly what you are thinking, exactly what you will say, and exactly how you will respond, there is no mystery left. But if you remain composed when others expect anger, thoughtful when others expect impulsiveness, or silent when others expect an explanation, you create uncertainty. People begin studying you. They wonder what lies beneath the surface. The goal is not to become cold or distant. The goal is to stop giving away your entire inner world simply because someone asks. Let people earn deeper access through time, consistency, and genuine connection. A person who reveals themselves slowly gives others something to discover, and discovery creates investment. The more someone invests their attention in understanding you, the more space you begin to occupy in their mind. Words are often forgotten, but emotions are not. A person may forget the exact details of a conversation, the specific sentences that were spoken, or even the circumstances of the meeting, yet they will remember how they felt in your presence. This is one of the most important principles of human psychology. If you want people to think about you after you are gone, do not focus only on being impressive. Focus on creating an emotional experience that feels different from what they normally encounter. Most interactions are emotionally flat. People exchange information, discuss ordinary events, complain about familiar problems, and move on. Nothing truly changes inside them. The conversation may have been pleasant, but pleasant is often forgettable. What remains in the mind is something that creates movement. A moment of unexpected laughter, a question that forces someone to look at themselves differently, a comment that challenges an assumption, a moment of genuine understanding when someone feels that for once another person actually sees them. This is why emotional impact is more powerful than constant communication. You can speak to someone every day and still leave no lasting impression. Another person may speak to them for 10 minutes and remain in their thoughts for a week. The difference is not always the amount of time spent together. It is the emotional state created during that time. Consider how people remember certain teachers, friends, strangers, or even brief encounters from years ago. They may not remember every word, but they remember the feeling. Someone made them feel capable when they were doubting themselves. Someone made them laugh during a difficult period. Someone challenged them at exactly the moment they needed to be challenged. Someone listened without interrupting when everyone else was waiting for their turn to speak. These moments become psychologically significant because they are connected to an emotional change. If you want to become memorable, learn to notice what people rarely receive. Many people want to be admired, but few know how to make others feel understood. Many want to appear intelligent, but few know how to ask questions that make another person think deeply. Many want attention, but few are capable of giving their full attention to someone else. This creates an opportunity. When you speak with someone, do not simply wait for your turn to talk. Observe what they are trying to communicate beneath their words. Notice what they avoid discussing. Notice the subjects that make their energy change. Notice when they become more animated, more defensive, more passionate, or suddenly quiet. People often reveal themselves through these changes without realizing it. A thoughtful question can stay with someone much longer than a compliment. A compliment may make them feel good for a moment, but a meaningful question can continue working inside their mind. Ask something that makes them examine their own choices. Ask what they truly want beyond what they are expected to want. Ask what they would pursue if fear of judgment disappeared. Such questions create a connection between your presence and their own private thoughts. The key is not to force emotion. Forced intensity feels artificial. Real emotional impact comes from presence, timing, and awareness. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is listen carefully. Sometimes it is offering a perspective that nobody else has offered. Sometimes it is making someone laugh at a moment when they had forgotten how. Sometimes it is telling the truth in a way that is honest but not cruel. People remember those who make them feel more alive, more understood, more challenged, or more honest with themselves. They may forget the conversation, but they will remember the internal shift that occurred while they were with you. And whenever that feeling returns, their mind may return to the person who first created it. Constant availability can quietly destroy the value of your presence. When people know they can reach you at any moment, receive your attention whenever they want, and expect an immediate response to every message, your presence gradually becomes ordinary. This does not mean that you should ignore people or play childish games with their emotions. It means that your attention should have value because it is connected to a life that does not revolve around being available to everyone. Human beings tend to notice what is scarce. When something is always present, the mind begins to take it for granted. The same principle applies to people. If you are constantly sending messages, constantly checking in, constantly explaining yourself, and constantly trying to remain visible, people have no reason to wonder where you are. Your presence becomes predictable. And what is predictable rarely creates curiosity. There is a difference between being unavailable because you are trying to manipulate someone and being unavailable because you are genuinely engaged in your own life. The first is an act. The second is a lifestyle. When you disappear simply to make someone anxious, your behavior eventually becomes obvious. But when you are focused on your work, your goals, your interests, your responsibilities, and your personal development, your absence carries a different meaning. You are not trying to create mystery. You simply have a world that continues whether other people are watching or not. This is one of the most attractive qualities a person can possess. Someone who has no direction outside of another person becomes easy to understand. Their attention is always waiting. Their schedule is always open. Their mood depends on whether someone replies. Their entire emotional world begins to revolve around one source of validation. Eventually, the other person senses this dependence, even if it is never directly spoken. But when your life has its own momentum, your attention becomes more meaningful. You do not respond because you are desperate to keep someone interested. You respond because you choose to. You do not abandon everything the moment someone calls. You understand that your time belongs to you before it belongs to anyone else. This creates a subtle psychological shift. People begin to understand that access to you is not automatic. The mind often becomes more aware of something after it is temporarily removed. A person may not think deeply about your presence while you are constantly available, but when your attention is no longer guaranteed, they may begin to notice notice the difference. They may wonder what you are doing. They may remember previous conversations. They may realize that they had become accustomed to your presence without truly appreciating it. This does not mean that you should suddenly become cold. You can be warm without being constantly accessible. You can care without being permanently available. You can respond without responding instantly. You can maintain relationships without allowing them to consume your entire identity. The strongest form of selective availability comes from having priorities. When you are building something, learning something, improving yourself, or pursuing a meaningful goal, you naturally become less available to distractions. You are not pretending to be busy. You are busy becoming someone with a larger life. This creates curiosity because people understand that there are parts of your life they do not see. They begin to wonder what occupies your time when you are not with them. They become aware that your attention is only one part of a much larger world, and when someone realizes that your life does not stop when they leave, your presence becomes more significant when you return. One of the simplest ways to become memorable is to understand when to leave. Most people remain too long. They continue conversations after the energy has disappeared, keep sending messages after the connection has already been made, and continue explaining themselves long after their point has been understood. They believe that more time automatically creates more closeness, but in many situations the opposite is true. When an interaction continues beyond its natural peak, the quality of the experience begins to decline. Every interaction has a rhythm. It begins with curiosity, develops through conversation, reaches moments of emotional connection, and eventually begins to lose energy. The person who understands timing knows how to recognize the moment when the interaction is still enjoyable and leave before it becomes ordinary. This does not mean abruptly disappearing or behaving rudely. It means having enough awareness to understand that a good moment does not need to be stretched until it becomes empty. Think about music. A song can be beautiful, but if it continues without structure, the listener eventually becomes tired. What makes a song memorable is the sound itself, but also the way it ends. The ending gives the experience shape. The same principle applies to conversations and relationships. When you leave at the right moment, the interaction remains connected to its strongest emotions rather than being remembered for the point where everything became repetitive. Many people are afraid to leave because they believe that leaving means losing attention. They think they must continue talking to keep the other person interested. They keep adding stories, questions, explanations, and messages because silence feels like danger. But this often produces the opposite effect. When you refuse to leave, you give the other person too much of you at once. The experience becomes familiar before curiosity has had time to develop. A person who knows when to leave creates space for the other person to process the interaction. After the conversation ends, the mind may return to a particular moment, a strange question, a surprising statement, a moment of laughter, a feeling that appeared unexpectedly. Because the interaction ended before everything was exhausted, the mind continues the experience internally. This is especially powerful when the conversation has reached an emotional high point. If someone is laughing, deeply engaged, or sharing something meaningful, you do not always need to continue until the energy collapses. Sometimes the best moment to leave is while the connection is still alive. The other person may later remember the interaction as something that ended too soon, and that feeling creates anticipation for the next encounter. The same principle applies to digital communication. Constant messaging can destroy the tension that makes communication interesting. When every thought is immediately shared, every silence is immediately filled, and every moment of curiosity is immediately answered, there is no room for anticipation. But when communication has natural pauses, each interaction has room to breathe. This does not mean using delayed replies as a strategy or intentionally creating anxiety. Artificial distance is easy to recognize. Real balance is different. You simply do not feel the need to remain connected every second of the day. You are comfortable allowing conversations to end. You understand that connection does not disappear just because communication pauses. People often remember what they almost had more strongly than what they completely consumed. A conversation that ends while the energy is still strong can remain in the mind because it feels unfinished. The person may wonder what would have happened if the conversation continued. They may replay the moment. They may anticipate seeing you again. The person who understands this does not try to control every interaction. They pay attention to timing. They notice when the energy rises and when it begins to fall. They know that leaving at the right moment can preserve the emotional quality of an experience far more effectively than remaining until there's nothing left to say. People rarely remember individuals in isolation. They remember them through associations. A song, a place, a phrase, a smell, a particular moment, or a certain feeling can suddenly bring someone back into the mind. This is why some people remain psychologically present even when they are physically absent. They have become connected to something beyond themselves. If you want people to think about you, understand the power of association. You do not need to constantly remind people that you exist. Instead, become connected to experiences, emotions, ideas, or moments that naturally return to their minds. When something becomes associated with you, the world itself begins to remind people of your presence. Think about someone you once knew who had a unique expression. expression. Perhaps they always used a certain phrase. Years later, you may hear someone say the same thing and immediately think of them. Or perhaps a particular song reminds you of a person because you listened to it during an important period of your relationship. The song does not belong to that person, but your mind has connected the two together. This process happens constantly. The mind organizes memories through connections. One experience leads to another. A place reminds you of a conversation. A conversation reminds you of a person. A person reminds you of a feeling. A feeling brings back an entire period of your life. When you become attached to a meaningful association, you no longer need to be physically present to be remembered. The most powerful associations are emotional. If every interaction with you feels ordinary, there is nothing distinctive for the mind to connect with. But if your presence consistently creates a particular experience, people begin to recognize that experience as part of you. Perhaps you are the person who introduces unusual ideas. Perhaps you are the person who makes people laugh when they are taking life too seriously. Perhaps you are the person who listens with unusual attention. Perhaps you are the person who challenges people to see themselves differently. Over time, these qualities become connected to your identity. When someone encounters a similar situation, they may think of you without consciously trying to. They may see a book and remember a conversation you once had. They may hear a certain song and remember a moment you shared. They may face a problem and remember the advice you gave them. In that moment, your presence returns without any effort from you. This is more powerful than constantly demanding attention because it allows the environment to do the reminding for you. You do not need to send messages saying, "Remember me." The world becomes filled with small reminders of your existence, but associations must be natural. If you try too hard to create them, they lose their power. You do not need to force yourself to become a symbol of something. Simply develop qualities that are genuinely distinctive. Be known for a particular perspective, a certain kind of calm, a unique sense of humor, or an unusual way of seeing situations. The goal is not to perform a personality. The goal is to become so authentically distinct that people naturally connect certain experiences with you. This is why consistency matters. If you behave differently every time someone encounters you, no clear association form. But if your presence consistently carries a recognizable quality, the mind begins to build a pattern. Your name becomes connected to a feeling. Your presence becomes connected to a memory. Your absence becomes connected to the possibility of experiencing that feeling again. People do not always miss specific individuals. Sometimes they miss how they felt around them. And when a familiar experience awakens that feeling, the mind searches for the person who was once connected to it. The people who remain in our minds are often not the loudest, the most attractive, or the most desperate for attention. They are the ones who possess something difficult to find. A rare perspective, a rare kind of confidence, a rare ability to remain calm when everyone else is reacting, a rare ability to make others feel understood without needing to dominate the conversation. Rarity creates value because the human mind naturally notices what it does not encounter often. Most people are easy to replace because they offer familiar experiences. They speak in familiar ways, react in predictable patterns, follow the same social habits, and often try to become accepted by imitating everyone around them. There is nothing wrong with being ordinary, but ordinary experiences rarely create lasting curiosity. When someone can easily find the same qualities in another person, the mind has little reason to keep returning to the original connection. This is why becoming difficult to replace begins with developing qualities that cannot be copied easily. It is not about pretending to be mysterious or acting superior. It is about building a character that has depth. Anyone can copy an outfit. Anyone can repeat a phrase. Anyone can imitate confidence for a few minutes. But it is much harder to copy years of discipline, knowledge, emotional control, personal experience, and a unique way of seeing the world. A person who has developed a distinct inner world becomes memorable because they offer something that others cannot receive everywhere. Perhaps they see patterns that others overlook. Perhaps they possess a calmness that makes people feel safe during chaos. Perhaps they challenge people without humiliating them. Perhaps they have the ability to listen deeply while others are only waiting for their chance to speak. These qualities become powerful because they are not common. The key is to stop asking, "How can I make people notice me?" and begin asking, "What can I develop that people cannot easily find somewhere else?" This question changes everything. Instead of chasing attention, you begin building substance. Instead of trying to appear valuable, you become valuable through what you know, how you think, and how you make people feel. Many people spend their lives trying to become liked by everyone. They adjust their personality depending on who is in front of them. They agree with every opinion. They avoid expressing anything that might create disagreement. Eventually, they become so adaptable that nobody truly knows who they are. They may be accepted, but they are rarely remembered. A distinctive person is not necessarily liked by everyone. They have a point of view, they have standards, they have interests that do not depend on popularity. They are willing to remain themselves even when the room is moving in another direction. This creates a psychological contrast. People may disagree with them, but they cannot easily dismiss them because there is something solid beneath their behavior. Being difficult to replace also means understanding the value of emotional quality. If your presence consistently brings something meaningful into another person's life, your absence becomes noticeable. People may find others to talk to, but they may not find someone who listens in the same way. They may meet other intelligent people, but not someone who challenges their thinking in the same way. They may meet other entertaining people, but not someone who creates the same feeling. This is not about making yourself indispensable to another person's survival. It is about becoming distinct enough that your presence has its own identity. The goal is not to trap people into needing you. The goal is to become someone whose absence creates a noticeable difference because your presence offered something genuine and rare. The more you develop your mind, your discipline, your emotional control, your knowledge, your creativity, and your character, the less replaceable you become. And when you stop trying to compete with everyone around you and instead focus on becoming a person who cannot be easily duplicated, people begin to remember you not because you demanded their attention, but because there was simply no one else quite like you.